What's the good life?
Well, the good life is found in Jesus, and it's following him, and it's walking with him, and it's obeying him, and it's living in his kingdom, and it's saying no to sin and saying yes to holiness. It's life with him. I mean, he said, I came that you might have life, that you would have it abundantly. I think that's a way of Jesus saying, I came to give you the good life. Everyone has some idea of what they think the good life is, but I think that's what it
is. Season 5, Episode 2, Preaching Through Podcast. My name's Dave. This is Luke, and this podcast is all about preaching the significance of Jesus in 21st century America. Although we have gone international, we do have international listeners, and we are so grateful for you and everybody else listening. Now, I guess 2 weeks in a row, so week in and week out, at least so far. We took a little bit of a break, almost a year between recordings, and now we're back. And this episode today is all about preaching through an annual theme. So that opening question, the good life, talk to us about what that is, why that's relevant to this episode, and what you think of when you think of that.
So it relates to an annual theme that is our annual theme at Ironwood for this ministry year. So we're running a ministry year that begins in July, ends in June. So at the time of this recording, we're about halfway through it. And what we decided, this is the first time we've done it as a church, but I'm really enjoying it so far. And I feel like it's already bearing some significant fruit. And so we decided that every sermon series we do is going to somehow connect to this theme that we are pursuing the good life in Jesus. And so that's our theme for the year. That doesn't mean we're doing a year-long sermon series called The Good Life, but every sermon series we do is related to that theme, related to that idea. And I'm finding it really, really fun. I'm finding it cohesive, and it's a great experience so far. And so we thought this could be a fun thing for people to consider as they plan out their preaching, as they try to bring some cohesion to what they're doing. Is, well, what if you have actually had a theme that everything connected to? And
one of the things we talked about in our very first episode, I believe, Vision series, was the idea of Patrick Lencioni's rally cry. Do you see this as different than the rally cry that Patrick was talking about there and getting everyone behind? Do you see this as different than that, or similar to, or complementary, or in opposition to?
It's probably in the same vein. It's not wildly different. The idea of the rallying cry is what's most important right now. And so that's typically like an internal organizational goal. For this is more thinking, how are we cast vision for some significant thing for our church, and then tie the biblical teaching that we're doing to whatever that macro theme is. There just is something to people that like having the mental framework to go, oh, this is what we're doing. It's a little bit like people at the beginning of the year will always go, some people will go, is there a word for the year? Oh, my word for the year this year is wonder. My word for the year this year is joy. And so that word starts to shape a lot of what they notice, a lot of what they think about, a lot of what the books they read, the music they listen to. And at the end of the year, sure enough, they go, you know what? This was a year filled with wonder. You go, well, why do you think that was? Well, because I focused on wonder for the year. So it's that same kind of idea. There's not a biblical command for this, but it's just, to me, it's like a helpful way to go, is there something that we could, as a collective church family, be focusing on together and casting vision for and informing our perspectives in a way that would shape us over the course of this year?
In the past, we've done the pink spoon people. We've had that as something that you referenced quite regularly in messages. We've also had, we want to be the best friend our community has, or the best neighbor, our best friend our neighbors have, something like that. It stuck with me to some extent, but you've done different statements like that. Is this similar to that, or is this different altogether? Do you see it as different altogether?
I see it as different. Those are both analogies that describe who we are trying to be as a church in relation to our community. The pink spoon people, those are the people who are giving a sample of the kingdom of God. So, that could be a theme, right? You could decide, hey, for this year, all of our preaching is going to connect to what it is to be pink spoon people. So you could certainly do that. I got the idea of this from the Church of 1122. Joby Martin is the lead pastor there. And when I first heard him talk about it, they were saying, they're trying to really reach men. And so their theme for the year was act like men. And so every sermon series was going to somehow connect with that idea that comes from, I think, one of the letters to the Corinthians of act like men. And so I thought, oh, that's interesting. Now, if you look at what they didn't have like 52 sermons about manhood, but they all somehow shaped like, here's what it would be like for us to act like men. And I thought, that's kind of an interesting idea. So it really is, you could go a lot of different directions with this. But it's trying to figure out a theme, a word, an idea, an image that keeps peppering itself throughout your preaching, that over the course of a year, people start to go, like if you were to ask people after a year, hey, what's the good life? Hopefully they would say some version closer to the kinds of things I said.
The good life is our theme for the year. And I asked you, have you ever done this before? I've been here since 2017. I don't remember a theme. I mentioned a couple things I do remember. You see those as differently. Why did you decide this is what we should do as a church? Why would a pastor decide this is something we should go after?
So there's like a macro reason and then a more specific reason. Okay. So the macro reason is, we're in our 16th year as a church and things are going well. And it's felt like for the last few years, as we've been transitioning some organizationally and trying to figure out some stuff, like we have this real temptation of we could just kind of do church and we could do it and it would be fine. But I felt like we're in a season where we need some focus. We need some vision. So we need some energy. We need something to rally around. And so kind of to the effect, like similar effect as a rallying cry. And so that was the macro reason. I felt like having something to galvanize us and focus, like that really makes sense. But more specifically, I thought from a missional perspective, in our situation and in our church, we're in a context where there are a lot of what I would call non-Christian conservatives, people who are, they vote to the right, they lean red. They're like what I would describe as like the family, freedom, faith people. And it's probably in that order. Like they love their family, they love our country, they believe in God, sort of, but they couldn't articulate a Christian faith. They don't have a relationship with Jesus. If they died, they would go to hell. They're non-Christians, but they're conservative and they have this sense of like longing for some sort of version of what the good life was. So I thought that the good life as a specific theme would be something that everyone has some vision of what they think the good life is. And so does Jesus. And so it just positioned us to week after week in our preaching have what Leslie Newbigin called a missionary encounter with culture, where you're speaking the language of the culture and you're confronting it and challenging it with the gospel. And so that felt to me like I could almost make any sermon series fit with that theme. And so that was specifically, it felt like in this particular moment, as we're trying to reach this community, this is a theme that not only could just galvanize us in general, but could actually really help us reach these people and create something that would make the folks in our church think, I should invite my friends. They would resonate with this.
One phrase that you said a lot there is, I thought, I think, I thought. So were you in a vacuum when you decided this? Or did you process this all by yourself and it's like, okay, here's what we're doing? Or did you bring other people in?
I brought other people in. Yeah, I mean, the way I tend to do stuff.
I knew that was the case.
Yeah, I mean, the way I tend to do stuff is I think about it and I write things down. And when I write it down, I always will, like at the top of the page, say draft. And that tells people, hey, this is something I want you to speak into. This is not me coming down, Mount Sinai with the tablets. This is under construction. Yeah, but then other people contributed to it. And in that particular instance, there was a strong degree of resonance. It felt like, okay, we're going to still sort of preach the same way. We're not like changing the way we approach our preaching as a whole, right? No. We're just bringing it under this theme and having this be a little bit of the connective tissue. Yeah, okay. So yeah, there was input and it's made it where as a teaching team, for me and Seth Trout, who's our other teaching pastor, like we've been able to rally around this theme.
I would imagine that a strong amount of that, yeah, I see this, there's some resonance there. It comes out of long-term relationship, long-term collaboration, long-term visioning together. It's not like, yeah, we do everything in silos, but there was a resonance here. It was birthed out of more of a collaborative leadership than anything else. I mean, that's my perception. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, I think that's definitely true.
I just think that plurality of bringing other people in is huge when you're discerning, you're deciding. Anything else about the discern and decide aspect of it?
Well, one of the nice things about it being an annual theme is it's only annual.
For now.
Yeah. This doesn't have to be, this is the theme that my preaching has to connect to till I die. It's like, no, I'm going to focus on it this way for this year, and then it will go. And that will shape us in a significant way, but I'm not stuck to this. I'm not married to this. If at some point I kind of lose interest in this, well, that'll be about the time that we're ready for another
Yeah.
one. And so I think it's like, discern something that you feel like connects with your people, connects with where you're trying to shape and focus your people, but then realize it's going to come to an end. And so don't put too much pressure on it.
We have an entire episode talking about sermon calendar planning. When we recorded that episode, it was under a different circumstance where you were preparing the sermon calendar for the whole of the church network that we were a part of, that church congregation, multi-site. Your process has largely remained the same because you were the one doing that process then, you're the one doing the process now. But I would imagine that this has affected your sermon calendar in such a way that, it's different than if you weren't doing it.
Mm-hmm. So what's interesting is I planned as we planned our preaching calendar for this ministry year, most of it didn't change in light of this theme. Most of it actually, all that changes, we went, okay, how we're going to talk about this series is a little bit different because we're going to connect it. So just to talk through what our series are over the course of this calendar. So the ministry year kicked off with a systematic theology topical series on the 7 deadly sins. So we looked at the historic 7 deadly sins that early church fathers identified. That was a great series, by the way.
I loved it. If you're listening and just that thought intrigues you, I would highly recommend ironwoodchurch.org. It was really interesting. It was a lot of fun. And just as a congregant, I really felt like God spoke to me through each one.
I appreciate that. And what was so fun was it was attractional. Like people who, there's 7 deadly sins. People have heard of that, even if they don't know what they are. And so there's like an intrigue of that for non-Christians. But then every week we're talking about how actually the good life is saying no to these sins and saying yes to holiness. Mm-hmm. So it was both attractional and very discipleship oriented. So that's how we started it. Then we moved into a series that is Jesus stories. It's just parables from the Gospel of Luke. And so that's, again, something that I wanted to teach for a while. I've wanted to teach the parables. Well, so now all I do is go, Jesus is giving us pictures of what the good life is really like. So I'm connecting it again to that theme. At the beginning of the year, we'll do a short series through the book of Habakkuk. And that's a series that we taught years ago that I wanted to bring back. It's short, but Habakkuk, it really is about how God is faithful even in the midst of suffering. And so I thought that would be a good series in the good life. I think so many people have this vision of the good life is it's always up and to the right. It always feels good. It's always comfortable. And to go, no, the good life actually involves suffering, but it involves turning to God as your joy in the midst of that suffering. Well, then another series that I already wanted to do was the glory of salvation. And so that's where we'll go in the spring. And that's like a systematic theology series on salvation, election, conversion, regeneration, justification, adoption, all these big theological themes. We'll spend the spring walking through that. And so all of that was stuff, Dave, that I was already planning to do. And I just went, oh, well, I can connect that to the theme of the good life. Now, the last series that will be really finishing that ministry year came out of specifically that theme of the good life, and that is to preach through the Beatitudes. So at the beginning of Matthew 5, blessed are the poor in spirit, blessed are the meek, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. And that one came specifically, that's the most concentrated dose of Jesus saying, let me tell you what the blessed life is. Mm-hmm. Let me tell you what the good life is. So in that sense, that series certainly was shaped by this theme, but it's more like that theme has just been a way to frame and talk about and bring cohesion to each of the series that I was already planning to do.
It's one thing to talk about it. It's one thing to allow it to influence. But if it just stays on the surface, what impact did it really have? You've done a great job. I've been to the majority of our Sunday services since starting the theme. You will say, and that's why this year we're focused on the good life, or this talks about the theme that we are focused on all year, the good life. But how do you make the most of it? How do you really engage with it? How do you make it practical? How are you, because we're in the middle of this, how have you thought about that so it doesn't just lay on the surface, but it really has a little bit more of the teeth that I'm hoping, or that I think you're hoping it will have?
Well, a lot of what this is doing is trusting that a steady drip is going to make a difference over time, right? You think about a glacier, and a glacier ends up carving out a significant valley, but a glacier is moving pretty slow. And so this is using way more of a glacier approach than a flash flood approach. Both of them are going to carve something. But this is saying over the course of 52 weeks, maybe not every single week, but probably 45 to 48 of those weeks, there's going to be some reference along the way to the good life. And so I'm trusting that approach, that it will happen that way over time. So typically the way this is playing out so far is at some point, I'll usually introduce the message. And then what I'll typically do is some sort of review of the series we're in, a very short recap. And that's often where I'll say, part of this year is we're focused on the good life. And so for each series, we're like the good life is saying no to sin and saying yes to holiness. So that's why we're looking at the 7 deadly sins. The good life is illustrated by the stories Jesus tells. So that's why we're looking at Jesus' stories. So sometimes it's just mentioning it there. But then what it's also doing is we're always thinking through application and implications. One of the tools that we make available is the sermon implication grid, where you're trying to go, what are the implications of this truth I'm teaching? Well, one of them that now I'm thinking through each week is, what does this text have to say about the good life? And so it's just a place to apply it. And so that might show up as one application, maybe not even in every message, but it's going to show up along the way. And then the other specific way that it shows up for us is in the tagline that we've given to our scripture readers each week. So we do everyone stands to read the scripture that we're going to preach through. And we change up the tagline they'll say at the end of it, right? The traditional tagline in most churches that do a scripture reading is, "This is the word of the Lord." And then the congregation says, "Thanks be to God." And I love that. That's pretty cool. But we decided, let's change that tagline for this year and have it be another way that it reinforces this theme. So now the scripture readers will say, "May this word of the Lord help us to pursue the truly good life in Jesus." You may be seated. And so that repetition over time is how some of this is sinking in. And so it's been fun because I've had different people along the way mention, oh yeah, that's the good life. That's the good, like, and so it's popping up here and there. I'm not thinking like, oh man, this is going to revolutionize everything for everyone, but it is providing another framework where I think for the rest of many people's lives, when they hear the phrase the good life, it will mean something different in the years to come than it would have a year ago.
The last thing that I want to talk about related to this is, what does it look like for getting this in front of your church staff, getting this in front of your key leaders? Is this something that you've decided, I want to make sure that our staff is on board, that this is something that's infiltrating beyond just Sunday morning? Or is it limited to Sunday morning? And maybe why did you make whatever decision you did?
Well, you could do it a lot of different ways. Like I could imagine that, a church could take a theme and make like, we're going to do whole study guides based off of this, or we're going to come up with additional resources, or we're going to do special events that relate to the theme. We're going to have good life nights where we all get together and share stories about how God has been good to us in the midst of things. So there's always more you could do. And so I think that's some of what a theme allows you to start to get creative. In our particular case, especially at the time that we decided to do it, it probably makes the most sense for this to mostly shape the Sunday services and the preaching. But it could certainly affect your calendar. It could affect the things you do. It could affect the kind of events you have or the kind of other programming or offerings that you involve. So again, a lot of times as a church, you're just trying to go, what are we going to do? What are we going to focus on? And mostly what you do is what you've always done. And so what I like about a theme is it does at least provide the opportunity to go, is this helping reinforce this? Is this communicating and contributing in some way to this discipleship goal that we have, that people would refocus in a certain way? So I think there's a lot of opportunity. We're not probably maximizing all of that. And I'm okay with that, given some of the other things that we're focused on right now. but I like the opportunity it creates.
I don't hate that idea of a good life night. We
Yeah.
just had baptisms, and like it's one of my favorite Sundays of the year. Like we don't do it once, but when there is a baptism, it's one of my favorite Sunday experiences because at our church, like many churches, I would imagine, person comes up, they have a script that they have filled out. It's not dictated for them, but some prompts to say, answer this question. Jesus is changing my life, or before Jesus, my life was marked by Jesus is my treasure because, and it really prompts some beautiful stories of God's faithfulness. And you hear it from a 14-year-old all the way up to, 90-year-olds, and just incredible stories of God's faithfulness, of how he is crafting a good life for these individual people who are saying yes to him and saying yes to him publicly. And one of the things that we did last episode, we talked about the busyness of ministry. One of the things that you did in the fall, which was very busy, was you had these lunches where you invited a collection of people, and Sandra and I were invited to sit down with, 20 other people. And they were largely people who I'd never met in the church. I can't remember what question you asked us, but it was like, what do you love most about this church, or something along the lines of that?
Yeah, it was not exactly that. It was, but that's close. It was, what's something this church has meant to you or your family?
And person after person who I didn't know went through and just shared stories of God revealing the good life to them. And it was like, number one, I wouldn't have met these people other than this lunch right here. Number two, I've never heard these stories of God's goodness. And number three, I love my church. Yeah. Like, this is really, really neat.
Man, I got to go to 11 of those.
Yeah, you did.
But honestly, it made it where every time I would come home and I'd tell Molly, like, I love our church. Like, these people are incredible. And many of those conversations, someone would be shedding a tear.
Yeah.
And that's not we weren't trying to manipulate people into crying or something. But yeah, it's wildly encouraging. And so, yeah, I mean, even as we're talking about I'm going, well, maybe as we get into the summer, and I mean, we're always looking for some interesting things here to do in the summer. Yeah. It might be fun to go, let's have a couple of good life nights.
That could be a lot of fun.
Yeah, we can talk about it.
Thanks for listening to this episode. Man, I'm so grateful that we've had 4 seasons just filled with evergreen content. That's really what we try to do with the Preaching Through podcast. There's a lot of podcasts out there that are more current, that address current events or new books or new entertainment. And I think those are great. I'd love to do something like that one day. But what I love most about this is we record them with the idea that you can go back and you can listen to this episode or any other episode when you hit that season of ministry, or when you hit that obstacle that you need to overcome, or when God tells you, hey, explore this. We want you to be able to go back and open those up. So it's great that we're in season 5. I want you to know that there are 4 seasons just filled with all sorts of resourcing that could help you pursue effectively communicating Jesus in your annual theme as you plan out your calendar, or as you realize that some of the themes that you might hit might be more painful. And so you're preaching through some pain, all sorts of different episodes. But this one's been a lot of fun, and excited for the next episodes that are coming through. Again, the theme of this year is, hey, we're going to share with you some of the things that we've learned, as well as some of the things that have been asked. And so keep hanging in there with us. Faithfulandfruitful.com. If you want to find any of the resources that we've mentioned today, Luke mentioned the implication grid. That's actually available at faithfulandfruitful.com/preaching pack. You can go there, check that out, get that for free. Any final thoughts, Luke?
Nope.
All right. That's the best way to leave it, where you said it all. So thanks so much, and we'll talk to you next time.